Alright guys, and right before we depart Yogyakarta, thought it's time for a little dip. Oh, this is just perfect. Woo! Oh yeah. Oh, this water feels good. Healing the weary bones. Traveling. Well, this sort of brings the end to our Indonesia leg of the trip. It was a fantastic journey. We went to Jakarta, we went to Yogyakarta, which are both on the Java island here in the center of Indonesia. It was so interesting because I found Indonesia to be quite different than, let's say, Malaysia. You know, it is there's so much more people here. Things move quicker. You know, there's much more activity, much more of everything really, and it's still much more developing. So in Malaysia, at least in Kuala Lumpur, I felt like, you know, almost like you're in a North American country, but in Indonesia it feels more like, you know, your classical idea of Asia. So that was quite interesting. We had the chance to see the some of the museums in Jakarta, which was awesome because we learned about local cultures, and there's so many of them because there's so many islands. People sort of stay secluded where they live. They stayed secluded for hundreds of years until, you know, recent travel sort of expanded, and you can actually take a plane or a boat, quick boat, right? So, but before that, these cultures sort of lived on their own and developed their own traditions, much different than maybe an island nearby. So it was just so cool to see the diversity and the complexity of all these cultures as we came here. So it's really neat. In Jakarta, we didn't get to see many land sites. I mean, we sort of had a glimpse on the Independence Memorial, and we saw the cathedral and the Grand Mosque there. Unfortunately, all of them were closed when we were there, so we just kind of saw them from afar, but that's okay. That's another reason to come back. And here in Yogyakarta, we actually had a really productive day of historic exploration. So we saw Borobudur, which is world's #1 Buddhist temple when we're talking about the size. We then saw Prambanan, which is the largest Hinduist temple in all of Indonesia, and I think one of the largest ones in all of South Asia. So really cool. We kind of found out how they were built around the same time between, as a sort of a competition match in a way, between different ruling kingdoms at the time. And then we also saw temples of Sivu, just less than a kilometer away from the Prambanan, which were Buddhist, which kind of showed us how intertwined Buddhism and Hinduism was at the time. You know, they had huge temples right next to each other, and there was no conflict in that. So that was it's kind of interesting how it gives you insight of the fine balance that the two religions had, and the peaceful coexistence that they enjoyed here in Indonesia in the 9th century AD. So with that, you know, we're departing for Bangkok in a few hours, but I just wanted to say a few things about Buddhism, because we saw so many Buddhist temples, and I never really did an introduction to Buddhism itself. So the part of Buddhism we saw here in Indonesia is Mahayana Buddhism, and now that we're going to Bangkok, we will see Theravada Buddhism, which is two main and different branches of Buddhism in today's world. So let me tell you a little bit more about sort of Buddhism and why there is these two branches. Now, when we're talking about Buddhism, you know, I couldn't explain it in a short video. You know, people spend their whole lives trying to understand this complex ideology, and even then, they can't fully grasp it. You know, to truly understand Buddhism, you have to partake in it. You know, you have to go to the temples, you have to talk to the monks, you have to understand the teachings, of which there are many. And it's an ancient religion. what it started with was coming of a Buddha to the earth. So when we talk about Buddha, it's not a specific man. So the Buddha is not a person. There's no, nobody was ever called a Buddha and then died and there was no more Buddha. Buddha is a title. And what we know is that there was a historic person that became a Buddha. And that historic person was Siddhartha Gautama. He was born in the, some people say either 6th or 5th century BC. So, 2,500 years ago. He was born in the northeast part of India, and he was a prince from a Gautama family. It was a warrior clan that sort of ruled there in northeast India. And when Siddhartha was born, he was born into a life of leisure. So, he was a really rich person. As a young man, he enjoyed the extravagance and sort of the decadence of the palace life. So he had every wish that he wanted to, come true. Luxury, excess. He had it all. And then one day, when he was 20-something years old, he wandered out of the palace and he saw an old man, he saw a sick man, then he saw a corpse on the street, and then he saw an ascetic man. Ascetic is somebody who sort of lives very simply. He doesn't live, he doesn't work, doesn't have a family, he just sort of lives and sort of meditates in the forest, right? Lives a very kind of vagabond, simple lifestyle. So that is what that's what Siddhartha Gautama saw when he left the palace for the first time in his life. He left by himself, so there was no guards or anything, right? And so that was kind of like a culture shock for him. He's like, oh my God, this is what's life really like, right? Because he hasn't seen it. He's been sheltered from it his whole life by the palace life. So when he saw that, he came to a realization that there is suffering in this world, the suffering that he didn't see yet, and it made such a big impact on him that he decided to change his life completely. He left the palace, said to his father that he will become a monk and go on a spiritual journey by himself to find a meaning to this life, because from the way he saw it, it was nothing but suffering. It was nothing but bad things. So he wanted to reconcile sort of, why are we here if everything leads to suffering? Now, it's important to understand that Siddhartha Gautama, this person, he was a Hindu. So he was brought in a Hindu household. There was no Buddhism at the time. And so everything that the ideology that he had in his head, the one that he was brought up with, was of Hinduism. So that's kind of what propelled him in his search. Yes, he tried to look for things his own way, but also he was highly influenced by Hinduism. And that is why when we were walking these temples, right, Hinduism, Buddhism together, they sort of don't contradict each other, because Buddhism kind of built on Hinduism. Hinduism is a religion, while Buddhism is more of a philosophy. So, okay, back to Siddhartha Gautama. So what happened was he went out of the palace, started living as an ascet, tried different things. He tried kind of living on very little food. That's actually the statue we saw in the Buddhist monastery where Buddha looks like he hasn't ate for ages. It's just a bone and skin. And so that's from when he was fasting and was an extreme ascetic. And then he did other things. He meditated on mountains and forests, and he wandered around, and he tried to sort of find his spiritual way on his own. And eventually he sat underneath a Bodhi tree. It's again in present day India. It's a great place of pilgrimage. haven't been there, but I heard it's very special, very energy strong place. Anyway, so he sat under that tree and meditated for many days. And through that meditation, it is said, he sort of fought the forces of evil. The writings describe it as a physical fight, like there was armies of demons and whatnot attacking him, and he would like sort of and he would fight them off. But it looks like he was meditating, so I think it's more symbolical. So he was fighting these things in his head, and eventually he took his finger and touched the earth, and with that touch he finally defeated all of the evil that was trying to attack him. And at that very moment he became enlightened. He reached the state of nirvana, and from then on Siddhartha Gautama was called a Buddha. So the Buddha translates to the enlightened one. So he became the enlightened one. So from going from a prince, he became a Buddha. So like I said, Buddha is a title. There wasn't a guy named Buddha that was born. And so from then on, from reaching this enlightenment, he started to teach other people. And for the remainder of his life, he walked around and he got disciples and he taught his philosophy, the philosophy that he understood during his enlightenment under the Bodhi tree. So you might ask, okay, Nick, but like, what is actual Buddhism? What is the philosophy? Well, it's very complicated, like I said, but there's two main things that if I can tell you, you'll sort of have a pretty good grasp of what Buddhism is. So the most important thing that Buddha taught is a thing called Four Noble Truths. So these are the four sort of basic truths that rule this world. The first truth is that there's suffering in this world. And this is something that Buddha understood. That's what the historical person understood. Siddhartha Gautama understood when he left the palace. There is suffering. Whether we want it or not, this world is full of suffering. So that's truth number one. Truth number two is that there's a cause to suffering. And this is something that Buddha kind of developed. And the cause in the Buddhist theology is the cravings that people have and the ignorance that people have. So the cravings, it means, if you have some weaknesses towards earthly things, maybe it is, it can be as simple as, let's say you're an alcoholic, or you're like a drug user, or any other humanly desires that sort of guide your life. That's something that Buddhists think will lead to suffering, because you can never really quite fulfill your cravings. Let's say, let's take an example of somebody who uses drugs, right? The more you use, the more you need to get that next high, right? So you're never gonna be like, oh great, I am using this amount of drugs, that's where I'm gonna stop, right? No, it's only gonna progress, because you're never gonna be quite fulfilled. You're looking for fulfillment in the wrong places, and therefore it's gonna lead to suffering. So that's number cause of suffering. Number two is ignorance. People don't see reality for what it is. They're ignorant of the true universe and why it was created and how it operates. And that ignorance you have to sort of kill by learning Buddhism. That's their whole premise, right? So ignorance is a second cause of suffering. And from ignorance, they say feelings like envy and anger and all these bad feelings that people feel are from being ignorant to what truly is around you and what truly you're supposed to do as a human. It's your ignorance. So that's the noble truth number two, the cause of your suffering, which is cravings and ignorance. Truth number three is the truth that suffering has an end. It's not a permanent thing. You can defeat it. You can sort of leave this cycle of suffering, and that is by reaching a state called nirvana, or as it also pronounced, nibbana. So that is something that you get when you become enlightened. This is something that Buddha had when he had his epiphany under the Bodhi tree. That is also something that monks in Buddhism, dedicated Buddhists, strive for to reach, is the nirvana state, which is when you perceive reality for its very true meaning. And if you reach nirvana, then your suffering will end. And so that's truth number 3. Now, truth number 4, the last one, is how do you reach that nirvana? And how do you reach it? If through Buddhism. So Buddhists believe that if you follow the Buddhist ideology, you will end your suffering and you will be at peace by reaching the state of nirvana. That's truth number 4. So that's the 4 basic principles of Buddhism. Think about it like as a doctor prescribing something. So he says, okay, you have a problem. I found a problem. Problem is suffering. Number 2, there is a cause to this problem. We found that it is maybe, I don't know, you've been smoking. Number 3 is the doctor will say, well, but we can treat it. Don't worry, it's treatable. And then number 4 gives you a prescription, and he goes, okay, well, to treat this, we will give you this medicine and this medicine, and you will be better, right? So think about Buddhism as a prescription to a very specific problem. In this case, it's the worldly suffering, both mental and physical. So that's the first part, the 4 noble truths. And then how do you be a Buddhist? How do you follow that 4th truth? How do you lead a life of Buddhist to get to nirvana state? That is a second concept that is very important in Buddhism. And that's called Eightfold Noble Paths. So I had to move from the pool. It was getting a little bit hot. Didn't want to be sunburned, so I'm just gonna finish the video here. So I was talking about the four noble truths, and the 4th noble truth is how to be a Buddhist. It tells you to be a Buddhist to reach nirvana, and the way to reach nirvana and the way to be a Buddhist is you have to follow the Eightfold Path. And this is an 8 principle of Buddhism that if you follow, you'll be a good Buddhist and you'll get there. And the 8 things you have to do is you have to have the right understanding. Second, you have to have the right thoughts. Third, you have to have the right speech. 4th, you have to have the right actions. 5th is you have to have the right livelihood. 6th, you have to have the right effort. 7th, you have to have the right mindfulness. And 8th, you have to have the right concentration. So if you follow these 8 principles, and they're sort of explained in the Buddhist theology and philosophy, you will get to nirvana. And these 8 principles are also sort of subparted into a 3 levels where they kind of progress you through the Buddhism, where you started with good morals, and then you sort of move to more of minding about meditation, and eventually to less material things and more to spiritual things. So in a nutshell, if you know about the 4 noble truths and the Eightfold Paths of a Buddhist, you know the basics of what it means to be a Buddhist. And the whole idea is that our lives are sort of driven by this thing called samsara wheel. The samsara wheel is a wheel that ties people to being regenerated, to be born again. And the idea is to eventually one day to break away from this wheel and not to be reincarnated, but go to the highest place possible, which is where the Buddha went after he died, which is the they don't have the concept of heaven like Christians do, for example, but it's a sort of a supreme place where only people that reach nirvana can go. So the point of Buddhism is to break out of this wheel of samsara, the wheel of suffering and earthly possessions. And to do that, you need to follow Buddhism, and if you reach nirvana, you'll break out of this wheel. And the way you do it is you have to have a lot of good karma. So these 8 ways of being a Buddhist, they're targeted to you creating good karma. And good karma can be made out of doing good things, like being compassionate, helping others, not being violent, not being a bad person. So these actions would create good karma and sort of bump you up on the scale of where you are as a person. And then there's bad karma. So all the bad things you can do in life, like lie and kill and be violent and be envious, they create bad karma and they sort of move you down. And like, as you see, it's very similar to Hinduism, when there's reincarnation, and if you're good, you go up the caste, and if you're bad, you go down the caste. Same with Buddhism, sort of the same idea. And so if you move up through hundreds of thousands of reincarnation, you will get closer and closer and closer to being a potential candidate to become a Buddha. And if you do that, you will reincarnate one day as a human, and that will be your final reincarnation. And during that final life, you will reach the true enlightenment, like Siddhartha Gautama did, and you will become a Buddha. And when you die, you will finally go to the final place in the afterlife. So that's the whole point of being a Buddhist, is understanding the Four Noble Truths, following the 8 ways of Buddhism, breaking out of the wheel of suffering, and then reaching nirvana and going to the highest place. Now, I just want to say that the Buddha is a very rare thing. So a Buddha only appears on Earth something like, they have their own timeline, but it's something like once every million or billion years. I'm sorry, I don't know exact timeline, but it's very, very rare. So when we get a Buddha, that's a time when the earth sort of awakens to the teachings of Buddhism, and that's the enlightenment time. So we are currently very fortunate, in Buddhist opinion, to be born in the time when Buddha was born. Even though it's 2,500 years ago, it's still very close on the Buddhist time scale. So we're fortunate enough to know the teachings of Buddhism. And there was Buddhas before Siddhartha Gautama. So there was, some believe there was 4 others, some believe there were more. But really, most Buddhists say there's inconceivable amount of Buddhas that were before, because time is sort of everlasting. So there was hundreds of millions maybe of Buddhas. And then there's going to be Buddhas in the future. And the next Buddha that is going to come to the earth is called Maitreya. And nobody quite knows when he's going to come. But one day, a person will come. He supposedly has to come on the horse with a sword in his hand. And he will be this next leader that will get enlightenment during his lifetime and become a Buddha and bring the new age of Buddhism to the earth. But that is going to be not in our lifetime. This will be far, far, far away in the future. But there's another Buddha coming. That's the main point I wanted to leave you with. To bring my sort of discussion about Buddhism to an end here in this episode is that's sort of what Buddhism is. So 4 Noble Truths, Eightfold Paths, breaking out of the wheel of suffering, reaching nirvana, and becoming a Buddha one day in many, many lifetimes. But what happened historically? So the historic Buddha, Gautama, he passed away, and after he passed away, his followers gathered, and they had different ideas how to decipher and continue his teachings. And this is something that we see with really any big religion. For example, Christianity, you have Catholics and Orthodox, right? And Islam, you have Sunni and Shia, right? So there's always some kind of different opinions on how the religion should be carried. And that's exactly what happened with Buddhism. So after the death of historic Buddha, his followers sort of branched off into different branches of Buddhism. So the main one today is the Theravada Buddhism. Then comes Mahayana Buddhism. There's another Vajrayana, and also Zen Buddhism. So here in Indonesia, we experienced the Mahayana Buddhism. But where we're going to go now to Thailand, that is Theravada Buddhism. Now, Theravada Buddhism is believed to be the more traditional one. So that's the one where the monks decided to follow the Buddha's teachings sort of to the T, and they said this is the most authentic type of Buddhism, and they're more concerned with a thing called becoming an arhat. The arhat is a state where you reach nirvana by the end of your life, and so when you die, you break out of the samsara wheel and you don't reincarnate again. That's sort of the point of Theravada Buddhism, and it is the point is kind of like the selected few are predestined to do that. So mostly monks will reach that state of arhat through decades of meditation and practicing Buddhism. But in Mahayana, which is a different branch, and which is the one that we saw here in Indonesia, the point is more of some monks actually will deliberately not reach that state out of compassion for other people on earth. So they want to reincarnate and teach other people and bring them up to reach the state of nirvana. So it's a little bit a different kind of end goal that these two branches have, and Mahayana is less traditional, and it's more of a augmented, changed way of Buddhist philosophy. But they're still Buddhists. They still follow the basic principles, and really all of them are trying to reach nirvana. So there's not that much difference, but there are some significant differences. But I just thought it's kind of cool, and I wanted to point out that we were here, the places, the Buddhist temples that you saw here are the Mahayana Buddhism, and now that we go to Thailand, we're going to see the Theravada Buddhism. And I hope we'll see the differences for ourselves. Perhaps we get to meet the monks and ask them some questions, but it'll be a great study to sort of figure out how different the different branches of Buddhism are in real life. So anyway, without further ado, I'm going to start packing. Gonna catch a plane in a few hours, and maybe I'll show you the road along the way, but yeah, see you in Thailand. Agriculture work that I see in the fields is actually done by hand. I haven't seen any combines or tractors or anything of that sort, so it's quite interesting because these fields are huge. I mean, to mend them by hand in this weather, that'd be terrible. But, oh, that's pretty cool. I don't know if you can see it. There's a statue with a flag there, but yeah, anyway. Sort of a little shocking. I didn't realize that, well, it appears that a lot of agriculture's work is still done by hand. Hey guys, so we're about to head into the new Yogyakarta airport, but I wanted to show you this traditional performance that they have right to the entrance. As you can hear, it is a traditional xylophone instrument playing in the background of Indonesia, and the ladies are performing the traditional dances. Just wanted to show you guys this a little bit before we head in. There you are. Good airport here in New Yogyakarta. I think it's only a few years old, but look at this. Very sort of futuristic. And you got all sorts of monuments here. There are new art. So here's it's called Benteng. There you go. You can come here and see Benteng. I wanted to show you this. You don't see this very often. Tsunami safe zone. So what you're looking at here is the runway, and then behind there, that's the ocean. So there's always a danger that tsunami might be coming and you need to hide. So this is why in this airport they actually have tsunami safe zones. So the idea is probably run behind this wall and you can protect yourself from the upcoming wave. Pretty cool. Never seen that before. You know, guys, this is hike. You look at these. You have the place where people can lay like a launch chair on the beach. You can look outside. And there you have it. There's the shoreline right there. This is so cool. I wish more airports would have these kind of resting places. I like that a lot, actually. All right, guys. Well, we are in airport Jakarta, waiting our flight to Bangkok, which has been delayed by 3 hours, but thank God, because we thought difference of 2 hours would be enough for us to get to Jakarta and change planes to go to Bangkok, but it was not. It took 3.5 because planes were delayed, and then this is a huge airport, so it takes you like 40 minutes just to get around. It's yeah, one thing to remember if you travel in Asia, be prepared that your flights will be changed like 4 times. You know, you'll get like a message saying that, sorry, your flight has been delayed by 3 hours, and it says no, it's actually in the morning, and they'll delay it again. It's a never-ending game, so it makes it really fun. But anyway, we're waiting for our plane to Bangkok, so hopefully we'll get there soon. All right, so we boarded our flight to Bangkok, and I just want to show you this. So we're flying with Air Asia, and look what they do, I guess, to make a little bit more money. So on the compartment where you put your bags in, there's actually ads. I never seen that before. Kind of neat. I mean, why not? I don't care. I mean, if the tickets are cheaper, just do that.